All right, everyone, welcome back to the land of Chem. I'm your host and the author. My name is Jeffrey Drum. Thank you all so much for joining me again.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Now, today, a complete Technology of Ancient Egypt documentary presenting my hypothesis on the function of the enigmatic Serapeum of Saqqara, including chemical research and exclusive on-site expedition footage documenting evidence of the proposed operation of this underground system. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's intro, so without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, everyone, here we go with tonight's episode.
And to begin, I'm about to show you a short clip from Members Only Episode 6, where I explain the function of the Avebury Serpent Temple Complex, including the Beckhampton and West Kennet Stone Avenues, which you can see here and here, as these will be directly relevant to the hypothesis on the Serapeum presented in today's episode. And I want to make one thing crystal clear, that these stone circle systems, like Avebury, and their counterparts in the Egyptian pyramids, are not batteries. Let me say that one more time. They are not batteries. They are attractors and conduits for lightning strikes, and distributors and transformers of the associated electric currents and electric fields. And if you aren't a member, here is a preview of the type of content that you will get with your exclusive subscription. I hope you enjoy. The electric field will also be sent down each of the Stone Avenue conduits, allowing it to flow here and here toward each termination, the head and the tail of this Serpent Temple complex. So now, let's start with the electric field being distributed into the ground and into the water table surrounding the structure, with an explanation of a very simple application, electroculture. And I will quote here, "Electroculture is described as the stimulation of growth in plants by the means of electricity passed into the atmosphere surrounding them or into the soil in which they are growing." There was a surge in research in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, particularly due to earlier observations which tied electrical storms to improved plant growth. Further research determined that lightning fixes atmospheric nitrogen into a solid form, nitrates, which then dissolves into raindrops and enters the soil system. This was undoubtedly responsible for the reported improvement in plant growth after electrical storms. And this pretty much sums up application number 1 for these complex lightning storm generator and capacitor systems. But this is just the beginning. Take a look at this. And I will quote here the title of this article, "Electric Field Mediated Chemistry, Uncovering and Exploiting the Potential of Oriented Electric Fields to Exert Chemical Catalysis and Reaction Control." And here from the abstract, this perspective discusses oriented external electric fields known as OEEF, and other type of electric fields as quote-unquote smart reagents, which enable in principle control over a wide-ranging aspects of reactivity and structures. These OEEFs, oriented external electric fields, will accelerate reactions, control regioselectivity, induce spin state selectivity, and elicit mechanism crossovers. So recall that there are other structures connected into the landscape surrounding this Serpent Temple complex, such as the West Kennet Long Barrow. And these electric fields could not only have facilitated the chemical reactions occurring within, but would also have been effectively harnessed by the dielectric ferrous sulfate product that they were creating, which I have shown has a dielectric constant of more than double that of the limestone used in the Egyptian pyramids, making it extremely effective in storing electric fields. And this opens the door to an immense topic of discussion when we will return to the Egyptian pyramids to discuss the roles of these electric fields within the chemical reactions in those reactors. And I found it interesting that they chose to use an image of lightning bolts stimulating the chemical reaction vessel in their paper, as it beautifully illustrates the concept I am proposing. All right, next, on to the distribution of the electric fields into the West Kennet and Beckhampton Avenue systems, or as I like to call them, stone conduits. As you can see here, and I used the black and red terminals as a teaser in a previous episode that almost no one noticed, to highlight the idea that this is an interconnected electrical system with a variety of structures that served multiple functions within this serpent temple landscape complex. So now let's investigate the head end of the serpent temple complex, known as the sanctuary, that you can see here in this 1723 depiction from William Stuckley, with Silbury Hill and Windmill Hill in the distance, Avebury over here, and the body of the serpent slithering up toward the head here, which is made from a much smaller stone and wood concentric circle system, the remains of which I showed in Sunday Site Visit 35. And it may have looked something like this originally. And here you can see the long stone conduit more clearly that directed the electric field into this component of the system. And it turns out that wood is also a dielectric material with a reduced capacity for storing electric fields, with a dielectric constant of 1 to 4 for dry wood that can be increased by up to 6 times for wet wood. So essentially, the long stone avenue conduit system is a transformer with precisely spaced stones that reduce the extremely high and potentially dangerous electric field from the main system into a much lower electric field as it passes through the conduits that terminate at the sanctuary. And the reduction of these electric fields is important because the sanctuary, as appropriately named, was intended for the healing interface between the structure and the builders. All right, now that you've seen that clip explaining the function of the Beckhampton and West Kennet Stone Avenue conduits that were utilized for the step-down transformation of high voltage currents and distribution of electric fields into other components of the Avebury Serpent Temple complex, the only way to harness the immense power of lightning is to essentially instantaneously distribute and transform the electric current. And that is exactly what was happening within the stone circle systems of England and Ireland and inside of the Egyptian pyramids. Now, let's turn our attention to the Serapeum in Saqqara, beginning with some important research regarding ultrasound acoustic cavitation for the production of hydrogen, as you can see here in this paper entitled Sonication to Hydrogenization, Sono-Hydrogen, describing a novel approach is here developed by the author under the name Sono-Hydrogen for hydrogen production. As a matter of fact, it has been well recognized that hydrogen can be produced by introducing ultrasound waves to liquid water. As compared with the other non-renewable energy sources, hydrogen can be produced infinitely by simple means of separation from water molecules. This innovative approach is utilizing high-frequency sound waves to produce hydrogen. Next, the approach here. It is an emerging technology and a combination of the power of ultrasound and the hydrogen production process when water is the liquid medium. When the ultrasound waves with high frequency pass through liquid water, it will lead to severe vibrations of water that result in generating acoustic cavitation bubbles. These extreme conditions provide an unusual chemical environment. When the collapse takes place, each bubble acts as a microreactor within which typical flame reactions occur. These microbubbles are obviously acting as microcombustors at which a combustion chemistry or reaction takes place. Then, the collapse by the impact of the ultrasound waves leads to the formation of hydrogen molecules as illustrated in Figure 2. And we have here Figure 2 with the ultrasound probe submerged in water within the sonoreactor system. The probe generates the sound waves that produce acoustic cavitation bubbles with water vapor trapped inside. The bubbles oscillate in size and collapse, causing the dissociation of the water molecule, breaking it down into highly reactive radicals, hydroxide and single hydrogen, resulting in the recombination of these highly reactive radicals into H2 and oxygen. Now, I have explained in many previous episodes how the quartz-containing components of these systems, for example, the acoustic catalyst antechamber of the Great Pyramid, utilize external electric fields from lightning to activate the inverse piezoelectric property to produce ultrasound waves. So the external electric field being transformed into mechanical vibrations within the quartz to produce ultrasound is a critical mechanism of operation within these systems. Once again, they are not batteries, but rather distributors and transformers of electric current and electric fields, and it always begins with the lightning strike. So recall from our recent expedition to Luxor that the Luxor and Karnak temples are connected via an avenue of sphinxes. And it is no coincidence that the conduits of parallel stones at Avebury are also called avenues, as these components at both sites have the exact same function. And remember this detail when we return to discuss the function of the Luxor and Karnak temples in an upcoming episode. And it turns out that we also have an avenue of sphinxes in Saqqara, or rather had, past tense, as there are no traces that I'm aware of or have ever seen of this avenue of sphinxes. But you can see it here on this map from 1874. So we have the Step Pyramid Complex here, the Pyramid of Userkaf here, the Pyramid of Teti here, and the Avenue of Sphinxes connecting the Serapeum here into a structure known as the Bubastion and the northern enclosure here. And those of you that were paying attention to that members only clip may already see where this is going. And it turns out that the Bubastion is constructed on a cliff face at the edge of Saqqara. And there was also a large outcrop of limestone bedrock within this temple that you can see here. This hill appears to have been the highest point of elevation in Saqqara, and it would be the perfect location for an obelisk. So when lightning struck this obelisk, dielectric breakdown of the stone material would occur, transforming the dielectric into a conductor, and the electrical current would be distributed throughout the bedrock of the Saqqara chemical manufacturing complex and along the Avenue of Sphinxes directly into the Serapeum.
All right, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the video. And if you want to help support the channel, you can pick up a copy of the book and grab some merch at thelandofchem.com. The second edition Egyptian blue version is now back in stock. Same text as the first edition, just a new color design and a brand new merch drop. Inazuma Kagaku, lightning, chemistry. Absolutely gorgeous kanji calligraphy designed by my Japanese tattoo artist Shin at Funky Guns in Kobe, and all of your favorites, including stickers. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
A critical statement about the behavior of electric current from lightning that was first presented in episode 116, showing proof of lightning strikes at ancient stone circles. Coming from the research paper here, a geophysical investigation of the Neolithic Calanese landscape, discussing the magnetic signatures from repetitive lightning strikes on the stone circle system at Calanese, stating here, when lightning hits relatively dry rock surfaces, it does not penetrate downward. Rather, skin currents extend outward along the free surface to a distance proportionate to the current density. So step one in harnessing the immense voltage from a lightning strike involves dissipation of some of that electric current through the bedrock surrounding the structures, as discussed in many previous episodes here on the channel. This is exactly what was happening at Avebury in England and in Luxor, with the Karnak and Luxor temple systems that are connected via the Avenue of Sphinxes that you can see here. So when lightning struck the primary obelisk within the high voltage distributor at Karnak, the current spread and dissipated in all directions through the bedrock surface into various components of the Karnak temple system, into the bedrock, and into the agricultural farmlands surrounding the east bank of the Nile River, which still exist today for reasons as simple as electroculture. And the Sphinx Avenue provided a channel or conduit to direct the electric current flow that was already moving in this direction directly into the Luxor Temple. And the Stone Avenue conduit systems at Avebury in England that you can see here had the exact same function, to channel the electric current from the obelisk and primary Avebury stone circle along the stone conduit system, and with each step between the stones, reducing the voltage that would be distributed into the sanctuary at the head end of the Serpent Temple complex. So now, let's take a look at the West Kennet Stone Avenue conduit system so you can see this component for yourself. And then we'll examine the chemical composition of the geology that makes this system work.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And today we will begin our site expedition at the tail end of the West Kennet Avenue, which is where we concluded our site visit of Avebury yesterday in the pouring rain. It's still nice and cloudy out today, but at least the rain is holding off for now and the sun is poking through the clouds up there. So God willing, we'll have a beautiful day exploring these sites, and I am extremely excited about the locations that we will be visiting today. So what you see in front of us is a structure known as West Kennett Avenue. And I'll put in a diagram at the beginning of the video so you can get some orientation and an idea of the layout of this system. Because I do believe that all of these structures are connected. There's Lexa from Ancient Odysseys. And what you can see here is what's known as an avenue of stones. A row of stones on each side of this avenue, pathway, causeway, channel, or conduit. Whichever term you prefer to refer to this series of stones. And the avenue, or rather the conduit, the stone channel, leads from the Avebury Stone Circle Henge, which we visited yesterday, which is over the hill in this direction, toward the structures that we will be exploring today. Namely two sites, well, several sites. We have the sanctuary, an absolutely spectacular structure known as Silbury Hill or Merlin's Mound. And then the West Kennett Long Barrows, along with several other sites that are here in very close proximity to the structure that you can see now. And I will say I get a similar sensation standing out in this causeway and channel conduit of stones that we got yesterday at Avebury. These structures and the knowledge behind their construction is far more complex and sophisticated than we understand. I'm literally walking along one of the Earth's energetic pathways, ley lines that connect all of these sites. And as you can see there, the sun is coming out. And it will be an absolutely gorgeous day out here today. And this morning, as we did yesterday hiking to Windmill Hill, we just parked the car and set off on foot. And that is also the plan for today's site expeditions. And you can see here a beautiful example of the two stones still in place on each side of this stone conduit, channel, avenue, however you'd like to describe it. And so again, this is about eye level here, you know, about 6 feet right there. So these stones are maybe 8 feet tall, at least the above ground portion. But certainly smaller than the ones that we saw at the Avebury henge. Hey, buddy. And some are bigger, some are smaller. This one's probably 7 feet tall. But they appear to be the same type of stone, which is referred to as sarsen stone, which is that siliceous sandstone, high content silica sandstone. Pretty nice shot over there of the English countryside. And I was saying in the previous site footage that our expedition to Avebury, and that was probably the most impressive site that I've ever visited, with maybe the exception of, you know, our private, Yusuf and I, our private special permission access into the Osiris shaft. Of course, I do believe there are some connections between the story of Osiris and the same civilization that built these structures. And as you will see here in a little bit, there are absolutely connections between the builders of these ancient monuments in England and later in Ireland and the builders of the Egyptian pyramids. And today we will see an absolutely stunning example of what I call a proto-pyramid. Again, one of the intentions of these site expeditions is to investigate the evolution of the structures in Egypt and to trace their origins So this is actually a perfect spot, because I believe that as we cross over this hill, yep, here's a rather large one. This is probably 10 feet tall. You got to remember, these things are probably buried at least 3 or 4 feet in the ground, if not more. And yeah, this is perfect, because these two stones here are the stones where we concluded our expedition from yesterday. And I'm still just blown away and puzzled and shocked, but I guess not really all that shocked that, okay, so this is where we were yesterday. There's the perimeter of the earthen enclosure of Avebury. So there's the earthen enclosure around the outside, a huge ditch, and then the stone circle structure on the inside. And there's a town, right? Literally dead set in the middle of this thing with roads running through it. And so yesterday we crossed across the street here and we walked up this way. And by the time we got in the car yesterday, we were literally soaked from head to toe. And so this is the perfect spot to begin today's expedition.
All right, now on to the geology itself and the chemical composition of these stones. First, starting with the Avebury sarsen stones, which, as explained previously, are silicious sandstone with high silica content, but they also have high iron content. These stones display abundant evidence of high temperature heating, as you can see here in this geological analysis of the West Kennet Avenue sarsen stones, examining the surface features of these standing stones. And you can see, as listed here, that many of them display surface flaking or peeling, a feature that we also see in the Central Pyramid Valley Temple in Giza and in many other sites from ancient Egypt, where the surface of the stone is flaking off. And the lead geologist of my colleagues at the Asida Project confirmed that this flaking is due to high temperature heating from the inside out, which would be very consistent for the process that I am about to describe. Many of these stones also have areas of silica glaze or melted silica that has formed a glaze-like substance on the surface of the stone. Again, evidence of high temperature heating of these stones. And last but not least, and actually the most important, the iron. As you can see here, many of these stones have iron staining covering the surface. This isn't to mention what is actually on the inside of these standing stones. But sarsen stone doesn't just have iron on the surface. The entire stone is permeated with iron. As you can see here, in an analysis of the iron content found in the sarsen stones at Stonehenge, the exact same type of high iron and high silica content sandstone that we find in Avebury and across the ancient sites of England. Well, guess what the Sphinx Avenue conduit system in Luxor, Egypt is made from? First, let's take a look at these Sphinx stone statues leading from the Karnak Temple into the Luxor Temple, so that you can see them up close for yourself. And then I will show you the definitive research revealing their significant chemical composition.
And you can see here at the front of the structure what is known as the Avenue of the Sphinx. And you can see all of these little statues here are Sphinx statues flanking the entrance into the Luxor Temple. All right. So now, without further ado, Yalla bina. And our guide here was just providing us with some pretty interesting information about that red granite obelisk, which will be particularly relevant to our upcoming discussion on the potential function of this site. So conventionally speaking, this is definitely dynastic temple building work. Smaller blocks of sandstone. Structure is attributed to Amenhotep III, Tutankhamun, and then later Ramses II. However, there are some indications that they're much older areas of the site, as of course with all of ancient Egypt, where they were repurposing older structures and building on top of them. So that the main intent for today's investigation here at the Luxor Temple is to determine if we can find evidence of older construction here at the site upon which this temple was later constructed. So here you can see some of these sphinxes. And this avenue that goes all the way down here, 3.5 kilometers, connecting the Luxor Temple and Karnak temples. And I will say it is absolutely beautiful out here. Probably here in perfect time to watch the sunset on the bank of the Nile River. Of course, I have my wife Alexa from Ancient Odysseys with me as always. Not too shabby.
All right, now that you have seen these components for yourself, what are they made from? They are not reconstituted limestone, but rather Nubian sandstone embedded with iron. Coming from this article here, discussing conservation methods and materials that can be used for the preservation of this Sphinx conduit system. And as stated here, samples of the sandstone were taken from one of the statues on the Sphinx's avenue to determine their components and current status by X-ray diffraction analysis, XRD, scanning electron microscopy examination, SEM, and EDAX elemental analysis. So we have conclusive evidence of not only the geological composition, but also the exact quarry site where these natural stones were extracted. As stated here, the road indicating the line of sphinxes leading from the Karnak Temple to the Luxor Temple was built entirely of Nubian sandstone, which was brought from the quarries of Jabal al-Silsila and Masaid, and the same types of stones from which the Luxor Temple and Karnak temples were built. The Jabal al-Silsila quarry is a series of mountains consisting mainly of Nubian sandstone, which extends on both banks of the Nile River for an estimated distance of about 800 kilometers and is located 30 kilometers north of Aswan between Edfu and Kom-Ombo. Furthermore, and more importantly, the Nubian sandstone contains various hard iron nodules, shells, and fossils, and the stone's mineral composition includes micaceous minerals. The stone is named, in this case, micaceous sandstone. Besides the micaceous minerals, there are gypsum crystals and pyrite crystals, which are considered the cement material for the quartz crystal, the main mineral of sandstone, silicon dioxide. Any of this sound familiar? Now let me repeat that one more time to drive this point home. The Nubian sandstone contains hard iron nodules, pyrite crystals, and silicon dioxide. So these stones have an extremely similar composition to the Sarsen stones at Avebury, being composed of high content silica sandstone, which I have discussed in numerous previous episodes, is an exceptional dielectric material. One more note here about pyrite. Pyrite is a semiconductor, that is, It is neither a conductor like metal nor an insulator like most rocks. Semiconductors such as pyrite can switch between being a good conductor or insulator under the effects of electric fields. In other words, a small amount of energy will switch pyrite from behaving like an insulator to behaving like a conductor. So this Nubian sandstone is embedded with iron metal. So we not only have a dielectric material, but we also have electrical conductors with the capacity for sustaining a magnetic field, which brings me to the next important concept and definition: electromagnetic induction, as explained here. Electromagnetic induction was discovered by Michael Faraday, and James Maxwell mathematically described it as Faraday's law of induction. As stated here, electromagnetic induction is a current produced because of voltage production due to a changing magnetic field. This either happens when a conductor is placed in a moving magnetic field or magnetic flux, or when a conductor is constantly moving in a stationary magnetic field. Now, some of you that have been really paying attention may remember this diagram here, as presented back in episode 103 from Charles Proteus Steinmetz, showing the radiating magnetic field or magnetic flux here in the concentric circles, and the dielectric field or flux emanating from the central conductor here in the radial straight lines. So remember this flux and field diagram. And just one more important thing before we proceed with the business at hand. Air is also a dielectric material with the capacity for transmitting electric current under the right circumstances. Boom. In this excerpt regarding dielectric breakdown, and I will repeat this part here. The permittivity of an ideal dielectric is independent of the magnitude of the applied electric field. The material is said to be linear. However, all practical dielectrics fail in this respect with sufficiently strong electric field. Typically, the failure is abrupt and is observed as a sudden, dramatic increase in conductivity, signaling that the electrons are being successfully dislodged from their host molecules. The threshold value of the electric field intensity at which this occurs is known as the dielectric strength, and the sudden change in behavior observed in the presence of an electric field greater than this threshold value is known as dielectric breakdown, as explained in the previous episode. Most importantly, down here, dielectric breakdown is typically accompanied by arcing, which is a sudden flow of current associated with the breakdown. A well-known example of this phenomenon is lightning, which occurs when charge is exchanged between sky and ground when the air, a dielectric, exhibits breakdown. So if the electric field in the air is too high, the air itself will become a conductor that can transmit electric current. You should already be putting the pieces of this brilliant ancient puzzle together, as we already know that the dielectric silica-based stones closest to the high voltage distributor at the Karnak temple will experience dielectric breakdown, exceeding their voltage storage capacity and becoming conductors. But they are also embedded with iron, which increases their conductivity with the additional capacity of producing a magnetic field. And the air surrounding these Sphinx statues can also transmit electric current when the electric field is high enough. So, how does the Sphinx Avenue stone conduit system work to reduce the voltage as the electric current travels down the channel? In today's modern step-down transformers, the electric current is supplied by an alternating current source. However, lightning is not alternating current. It is an instantaneous, direct current electrostatic discharge, where the current only flows in one direction for a very short time. But the principles of physics involved in the function of this system are still the same, specifically regarding mutual induction between these iron metal permeated sphinxes or the Avebury Avenue stones, which allows for electrical energy to be transferred between two objects. The direct current through the first transformer generates an electric and magnetic field flux surrounding it. The transformers are precisely spaced so that this electric field will exceed the dielectric capacity of the air, allowing the current to arc to the next transformer. The meticulously engineered space between the sphinxes also allows the induction of these same fields within the second transformer. This is due to Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, but some of the voltage will be dissipated through the air during this field transfer, thus reducing the immense voltage from the initial lightning strike as the current is passed through each sphinx or Avebury Avenue step-down transformer. So now, let's see this in action. The direct electric current flows into the first transformer, creating dielectric and magnetic flux from the strong electric field emanating from the iron permeated stone. This strong electric field creates dielectric breakdown in the air, and the current will arc to the next transformer. The same process will occur again, but this time with less voltage than the initial current. The radiating dielectric field will again cause dielectric breakdown in the air, producing another current arc, but once again with less voltage than the previous. Passing the current step by step down the line of voltage reduction transformers until it reaches the Luxor temple, with the precise amount of storable voltage that is within the dielectric capacity of the materials within this temple. So now, let me run it back one more time so you can see the system in operation. But one thing to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, is that this entire process would happen almost instantaneously in the blink of an eye, sending the immense voltage from the Karnak temple down the line of Sphinx step-down transformers directly into the Luxor temple. And this is exactly what was happening at the even more ancient system within the Avebury Serpent Temple complex, the predecessor of the Karnak Luxor Temple network.
All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to our 3 other channels: my wife Alexa's channel, Archeo Alchemy, our mutual international travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats, for all you cat lovers out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video.
This configuration is extremely similar to what we see in the Avebury Serpent Temple complex and the West Kennet Long Barrow ferrous sulfate reaction chamber. So what was happening inside of the Serapeum? This underground tunnel, chamber, and container system. And how did this structure transform that electric current? Let's start with the opening of the Serapeum here. And as always, we fill the structure with water to prime the system prior to the introduction of the electric current. Now, these massive containers made of black and red granite inside of the Serapeum. These containers are ultrasound generators, as are all of the containers within every structure that I have discussed thus far. For example, the containers inside of the Osiris shaft, as explained in Members Only Episode 9, are also ultrasound generators. These housings were filled with water. The electric current distributed through the avenue of sphinxes into the Serapeum moved through the bedrock into the stone containers. First, this explains why these immense containers are embedded within housings sunk down into the bedrock floor within each chamber. Next, the electric field induced within the container dielectric stone matrix material by the electric current is transformed by the quartz crystal embedded in the stone into mechanical vibrations that produce ultrasound waves. This also explains why any small cracks within these containers had to be removed, as any imperfections in the container would have led to catastrophic fractures and failures when this system was activated. Now, as explained in the research paper regarding ultrasound acoustic cavitation with water as the medium, these high-frequency sound waves break down the water and release hydrogen and oxygen. As the sonochemical reaction continues, the hydrogen and oxygen accumulate within the upper vault of the chamber housing, which is connected into this underground tunnel system with these channels carved into the roof, which you can see here, that are configured in a precise manner so that the gases can flow out of each reaction chamber and out of the system for collection and separation. So, ladies and gentlemen, my hypothesis is that the Serapeum of Saqqara is a hydrogen generator that utilizes electric fields from lightning to produce ultrasound vibrations emanating from the quartz-embedded containers to generate acoustic cavitation bubbles within the water that break down the molecule, allowing the isolation of hydrogen, specifically H2.
All right, everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video, and please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the physics and chemistry technology of a lost civilization and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from across the world. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to an absolutely massive Sunday site expedition. We are here in Saqqara, specifically to investigate the Serapeum and explain on site in detail my hypothesis that was presented in the previous episode regarding the acoustic cavitation generation of hydrogen. And we're here looking at the corner of a structure known as the Bubastion. And this modern building here is constructed right on top of a very special location here in Saqqara. This is my buddy Hassan, our driver, my wife Alexa from Ancient Odysseys. Yeah. And I'll show you on the old map from 1874 why this area is of particular importance regarding the function of the Serapeum. So we're standing on a huge mound of sand. All of this is sand here. And this would have originally been a huge cliff face with this mound of bedrock, limestone outcrop of bedrock here. Definitely looks to be the highest point of elevation, as explained in the previous episode. And of course, they built a house or a little office or whatever that is, looks more to be a house, right on top of this thing. And so today we are going to investigate all of these components and begin to put the pieces together regarding the function of the enigmatic Serapeum. So we're going to head over next toward the Pyramid of Teti I to see if we can find any remaining evidence of the Avenue of Sphinx. And I looked on Google Earth to see if there were any traces that remain, and it looks to be either completely buried in sand or the sphinxes having long been removed from the site and now in a museum somewhere. But we're going to see what we can find. But this is the start of everything right here. Once again, no surprise whatsoever that there is a modern building right on top of this thing. Anytime I see that, it always raises my eyebrow as to A, what is buried underneath this thing, and what were they trying to cover up that required them building this structure right on top. It's a beautiful day out here in Saqqara. You could see all the palm trees, date palms and farms here adjacent to the archaeological site. And I took the new wind protector off today because having that thing on severely impedes the audio quality when I'm speaking from behind the camera. But of course, it's a super windy day out here in Saqqara, so you win some, you lose some. Can't please everyone. So just deal with it. It's windy in the desert. But I'm really excited to get into the Serapeum today. And again, we'll be explaining in depth, step by step, the mechanisms of operation that went into making that structure work. Yalabina. Hassan is kind of distracting the guard. We're going to take a walk over this way, because there was a temple up here. So this mound, the Pyramid of Teddy I, Pyramid of Userkov, and the Step Pyramid. And one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these mounds of sand that are around are from the archaeological excavation process, where they removed sand from around the pyramid structures and pushed it out into the desert. And I can say, just looking around at this little 360 view, we're definitely on the highest point of landscape elevation. And man, I guarantee you that house right there, it's kind of sunk down into the side of this cliff face. Wouldn't that be a nice house? Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right, so once again, kind of covert operations. All right. So I'm glad we got a chance to run up here, because I'm definitely not supposed to be up here. And they are certainly good at covering up areas where functional components may have once stood, i.e. the old obelisk or standing stone that, after investigating this area, I truly feel to believe that there was once an obelisk or standing stone that was a part of the temple structure that is now basically non-existent. There's nothing up here, just a bunch of mounds of sand. So who knows what's really buried under all this stuff. And of course, the Bubastion is a temple dedicated to the god Bastet, the cat. Another gorgeous esoteric symbol with much deeper meaning than the superficial religious interpretation. And this deeper, true meaning of that symbol being directly connected to ancient chemistry and physics. And I already have that on my list for an upcoming research episode to explain the esoteric symbol of the cat. And it's directly related to the location for the Bubastion temple. All right, let's go. All right, so we just walked around this way. There's the house. And I'm going to take you inside of this tomb here, because there's something very interesting at the tail end of this structure. And this is definitely a dynastic era tomb. All of the typical accoutrement that goes along with it. And they've discovered tons of burials in this area, both humans and animals. This tomb is connected into the Bubastion. See, there's an underground area here. And this goes down into the bedrock over here. And at the tail end of this tomb, you can see they ate this bull. But look what we have here. A huge shaft goes down into the bedrock, and there's a tunnel that goes in this direction back into this outcrop of bedrock. So that house is literally on top of this whole outcrop of bedrock. Sitting on top of shafts and tunnels. Some nice remnants of Egyptian blue there. Area carved from the bedrock here. Again, I really like this. This is a beautiful depiction here. Holding the Jed pillar. Another one here. And who is this down at the bottom? Who is this at the bottom?
Atom?
This is Atom?
Yeah, not Atom. This is the owner's tomb.
Ah.
Carrying a jet pillar.
Yes, yes. Okay. So he's saying that this is the tomb owner, the individual that was buried in this tomb. This is a depiction of that person holding up the Jed pillar.
And use the double crown, white and red.
Yeah.
This upper possible Egypt.
So you can see the two serpents, cobras holding the Ankh, the crown. There would have been one of Upper and Lower Egypt. You can see it a little better, the two different crowns. And these were later merged together into one crown that symbolized the pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt. All right, everyone, as I just mentioned, if you want to help support the channel and get access to some exclusive research content, check out the Land of Chem members-only channel now with a new tier called The Alchemists, featuring a 3-part episode revealing the function of the Teotihuacan Pyramid Complex. Also, a completely unscripted, unedited Ask Me Anything video every single month, now on part 5. And ladies and gentlemen, I can finally announce a brand new series entitled The Land of Chem in the Lab that will feature a variety of experiments designed to test the hypotheses presented here on the Land of Chem channel. Links to everything in the video description below. Thank you all so much for the support. Now, back to the video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin our investigation of the Serapeum, and I wanted to start here to show you this above ground area because this area is on top of the eastern galleries inside of the Serapeum that are currently closed to the public. There was a collapse of the interior chambers below this area, and I'll show you some photos and some diagrams courtesy of my colleagues at the Acida project that did have access into this area of the structure. And unfortunately, the ceiling has collapsed down into the ground, so it's no longer accessible to the public. But I wanted to show you this area before we go inside of the main structure, the entrance to which is here. So now, as proposed in episode 128, we are now looking at the inlet into the Serapeum. And water would have filled this subterranean tunnel, chamber, and container system. And when we finish, I'm going to see if we can take a look at this above ground portion here. Let's go ahead and do it right now. Because an essential part of this hypothesis would be the collection of the product. And you can see the channel leading into the system here. And here, well, look at what we have here. See a duct going down from this machine into the ceiling of the underground chamber system. But of course there has to be a hole. And I bet you this is the housing of the gas collection system. And of course they've got a modern vent going down into this thing. And there absolutely would have been a portion of an ancient structure here connected into the top of this ancient acoustic cavitation hydrogen generator system. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The hypothesis proposed in episode 128 is that the underground system of the Serapeum was for the production of hydrogen. And there's not too much else out here around this area. And if you look here in the distance, there was once an avenue of sphinxes leading from the Serapeum here back in this direction toward the Bubastion. But as we were driving up here, there are nothing but mounds of sand in this area, because there was a bunch of sand moved from the modern road that's currently covering up any remains of that avenue of sphinxes. The statues themselves most likely having been removed from the site in distant antiquity. But this is what I was looking for. This entire area here would have been your collection point. Most likely a reservoir, chamber of some sort, and a hole. And you can see here this, let's walk around to the other side so we can get a closer view. So you can see that there's a, it looks like a modern ventilation system. And we'll see if we can spot the, and you can see that vent going right into the ceiling of the underground chambers. It's okay, it's okay. Ana baruch dalwati. So now we'll proceed through the inlet into the underground chamber system, and we'll get a better look at this area here. And you can see here that there's a cemented opening that it would lead further into more tunnels, chambers, and containers within this Serapeum system. Hey, hey. You can see here the cement, the gray cement, covering up the arched opening into this additional subterranean system here. شكرا صديقي. أنا من مصر. دلوقتي أنا بعيش هنا في معادي. Here's another interesting feature that I haven't noticed before. Look at this pit here. Definitely relevant. All right. يلا بينا تحت.
يلا بينا تحت. تبع البعثة بتاع جبريل. البعثة تبع بعثة حفاير مريم.
أنا آسف مش فاهم.
البعثة.
أنا بتعلم مصري تتكلم شوية.
أقصد بعثة حفاير مريم. أنت تبع البعثة بتاع اكتشاف آثار.
صديقي أنا آسف مش فاهم.
يس.
إنجليزية.
إنجليزي.
أيوة.
يس. أوكي.
just
No
look at-
problem. No problem.
Just look at the erosion leading down in here. And I can literally see the water flowing through this channel down into the underground system. Of course, these stairs that we are walking on now are a modern addition. There were no stairs in here. It was a huge sloping inlet, bringing water into the subterranean system. Oh, there it is. Perfect. You have the flashlight? All right, so here in the ceiling, this is all modern concrete and reinforcement work here. But you can see this conduit, this pipe, this vent system, vent shaft that would have connected into the system that I just showed you above the structure. Of course, it's in the perfect place. And you can already see here some of the channels. And now that I've explained it, you see where my finger is here, and we'll look at it specifically. There's a channel here. And my first time in the Serapeum, 2017 with Yusuf, I couldn't figure out what these channels were. Right here, where my finger is pointing, what these channels for. And this channel is literally moving right up in this direction. You can follow let me point with my finger, or you can look at the shadow. The shadow will show you where it goes. It flows up in this direction. And this ceiling here has been carved out to facilitate the flow of gas up in this direction. Look at that. And this is my first time down inside of this structure since I stumbled across the revelation of the function of this system. And now it's clear as day. Look at that. Okay, so this archway, also modern restoration. You can literally see the channel that flows up. All right, so I guess ladies and gentlemen that are unfamiliar with the structure, this is a system known as the Serapeum. You can see more of these, the ceiling channels here, the guidelines that would have facilitated the movement of the gas. Look at this again, there's like a pocket here that would have fed in this direction. So again, you can see how this entire ceiling here is carved out. There's a pocket here that would have moved in this direction along the channel. Again, this is modern restoration, out in this direction. And this is exactly what I was looking for when we were coming down in here. These little pockets feeding directly out up this way to where this modern vent shaft goes. Very interesting. Okay, so over here, this is what's known as the Eastern Galleries. And this leads out to the area with the collapsed system that we just showed. So, but this is red granite container. The lid is over there where we just came from. The container housing that also has a pocket here and a channel that leads out into the ceiling, back. This little pocket here and here feeds up in this direction, out here into the main tunnel system. Okay, so this entire system would have been filled with water. Most likely all the way up to here. And let's go find there's a few things that I'll talk about as we walk down this way. And I'm not going to show every single one of these container housings because they all had the same function. There's a few specific containers that I will discuss while we're down in here. So I mentioned in episode 128 that any minor imperfections and cracks in these containers had to be removed because of the vibrations within the quartz that produce ultrasound when this system was operational. And any minor imperfections or cracks could have led to catastrophic fractures and damages of these inverse piezoelectric acoustic sound wave generators. Again, I know that's a mouthful, but that's exactly what these things are. Huge containers of dielectric material that is embedded with quartz. When that quartz okay, oh. So let me continue my thought there. So when there is an electric field introduced into the quartz crystal, it activates the inverse piezoelectric property, producing ultrasonic waves, ultrasound. Here you can see that there's a housing, a rectangular cutout, and the containers were sunk down into the bedrock floor of the chamber. Because the electric currents would have coursed directly through the bedrock into this dielectric material, inducing an electric field within the container itself. That electric field activating the inverse piezoelectric property of the quartz. So what we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen, are huge ultrasound generators. And you can see here in the lid these scoop marks. There's some scoop marks here, and we'll walk down to a few that have better examples of those scoop marks. You can see a few dimples here in the lid of this container. And here's a good one for us to talk about the cracks and the removal of these imperfections. All right, so you can see the top of this thing looks like Swiss cheese. And this is from the removal of small cracks in the lid. So you may be asking yourself, why was it so important for them to remove these small cracks? If these are just sarcophagus for the burial of the Apis bull, why was it so important to remove all these small cracks? Because they weren't sarcophagi. And when the acoustic vibrations were activated inside of these sound generators, the mechanical vibrations of the quartz could have led to exacerbation of these small cracks, turning them into huge fractures that could have split the lid and destroyed your acoustic sound generator. So all the small cracks had to be removed to eliminate the potential for catastrophic damage to these components while they were operational. And we'll go to another example. Here's another great example of the lid that looks like Swiss cheese. And I have proposed in previous episodes that these cracks were removed with acid because they're finished to a very, very smooth surface. So you could build, let's say, for example, a reservoir of clay around your little, so let's say there's a little crack right here where you see that dimple. You build a small reservoir of clay around the crack. Pour an acidic solution into your reservoir. It will dissolve out the crack. You neutralize your acidic solution with a basic solution, bringing your pH back to neutral, essentially water. You can then wipe out the solution and the dissolved material, leaving you with a perfectly rounded dimple in the hole of the lid. So a perfect example of how they were using chemistry for stone working applications. So there's another dimple here. You see some in the side here. So first and foremost, the containers are sunk into housings in the bedrock, improving the contact with the limestone bedrock to facilitate the transmission of the electric current coming from the lightning strike directly into the container. You see this one has some pretty massive fractures removed here. See these smooth dimples in the lid here. So my hypothesis about the acoustic cavitation generation of hydrogen answers a number of questions about the configuration of the Serapeum. One, why are these containers sunk down into the limestone bedrock within these housings? Answer, to improve the connection and the distribution of electric currents directly into your sound generator. Two, why was it so important to remove these tiny little cracks in the lid? Well, when these systems were active, mechanical vibrations within the quartz could have turned those small cracks into huge catastrophic fractures, breaking your box apart. So that was done to eliminate any potential for catastrophic damage to these acoustic generation components. So again, imagine this system filled with water, just as I demonstrated in episode 128. And now that I'm in here, I can see it so clearly. It's pretty crazy. And then here you can look back and see the channel at the top of the tunnel that would have directed the collected gases out of the chamber housings toward the collection point. Okay, so again, we're filling the system with water. The electric current induces an electric field inside of the dielectric material embedded with quartz. That electric field activates the inverse piezoelectric property of the quartz, producing ultrasound vibrations within the water, causing the breakdown of the water molecules and releasing hydrogen and oxygen into the upper portion of the chamber housing. Those gases then flowing out through the tunnel system toward the collection point. And all of this moves uphill in this direction, up out of the chamber housings and toward the collection point. Oh, goodness. And like I said at the very beginning, this is the first time that I've been down in here since I put all the pieces together, and it's crazy. It's one of those things, someone was asking in the comment section, has my work changed my perception of how I view these things? And yeah, of course, it's inevitable that it does, because once you see it, it cannot be unseen. And it is clear as day, looking at this system with my current hypothesis in mind, that this tunnel system, these chamber housings and the containers themselves, it is a water-filled sound reactor that was used to disassociate water for the production and collection of hydrogen. And you can see here again the channel at the top flowing out in this direction and up toward the collection point. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so with that being said, that concludes this week's Sunday site visit to Saqqara and inside of the Serapeum. And if you haven't seen episode 128 quite yet, you're missing out on one of the most major episodes that I've ever produced. I will put a link in the video description below. Everyone say hello to my beautiful wife, Alexa, there behind the flashlight.
Yes, sweet. Hello.
Who's also been filming for her channel, Ancient Odysseys. I'll put a link to her YouTube channel and her merch store in the video description below as well. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much. This is crazy, and I'll see you next time. Time for the weekly cigar review. Stay tuned. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, today we investigated the Blue Bastion and the hill and cliff face here where that modern house sits right on top of this critical area. You can see here the pyramid of Teti I and the avenue of sphinxes that once connected directly into the Serapeum. So the lightning struck the obelisk here. The electric current was distributed through the system and along your stone avenue conduit or step-down transformer system, directing that electric current into the Serapeum. That electric current induced an electric field inside of the red and black granite containers, producing ultrasonic vibrations emanating from the quartz to disassociate the water filling the underground tunnel system to release hydrogen and oxygen. So now we're going to go inside of the museum. Because if I remember correctly, see the snake? And over here, one of your dielectric step-down transformers from the Avenue of Sphinx, the stone conduit system that once led from the Bubastion into the Serapeum. All right, everyone, that is it for today's video. This was episode 175, a Land of Chem exclusive ancient Egypt technology documentary revealing the function of the mysterious Serapeum of Saqqara. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Please remember to subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube if you're interested in the technology of a lost civilization utilizing physics and chemistry and the function of the Egyptian pyramids and other ancient structures from around the world. Click that little notification bell, like, comment, share, and stay tuned. If you want to help support the channel and get access to exclusive research content, check out the members only channel and thelandofchem.com if you want to pick up a copy of the book or grab some merch. Links in the video description below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or on X, my handle is @thelandofchem. Also, don't forget, after you finish watching this video, please go subscribe to our 3 other channels. My wife Alexa's channel, Archeo Alchemy, our mutual travel and culinary adventure channel, Let's Go with Lex and G, and the best channel on YouTube, Egyptian Trash Cats, for all you cat lovers out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you all so much for the support. I think that's it for today's episode, so I will see you next time. Yo, are you still watching this? Please subscribe to the Land of Chem here on YouTube and click that little notification button. New videos coming out every single week. And check out this other episode. Come on, do it. Do it now.